Chapter 36. Backdoor. Gaggara grabbed her dart thrower from where she had laid it on the counter, and then, almost as an afterthought, she pulled the leg bone off of what remained of her portion of the chicken, looking wantonly at the rest of the carcass as she did so. Finally she stepped away from the bar, biting into the chicken leg. She looked around the barroom, allowing her gaze to settle on the innkeeper for a moment. The innkeeper seemed to shrink visibly as the young harpy stared at him. Gaggara didn't look at him for long. Her eyes shifted to her boyfriend, and she walked over to him, resting a hand gently on his left shoulder. "I'm ready whenever you are." "Let's go then," Reyes suggested. He climbed out of the chair, rubbing his hands together in an attempt to rid himself of some of the grease that had come off the chicken. Gaggara took another bite from the chicken leg and chucked what remained over her shoulder. As she did so, she started towards the barroom doors. Reyes stopped her. He reached out and grabbed Gaggara by the upper arm, marking her with chicken grease that had still adhered to the palms of his hands. "Hold on a moment, sweetie." Gaggara half turned and looked at him questioningly. "I thought we were going." "We are, but not that way," Reyes said. "Not unless we absolutely have to." Agnar nodded. "If you go that way, everyone in the village will see you. All my sisters will wonder who you are and what you're doing here in Sun's Blessing. It might make things hot for me as well. Some of my sisters know I came this way." Reyes glanced over at the innkeeper. "Is there another way out of this inn? Some sort of back door?" "Yes, ma'am," the innkeeper replied very nervously. He didn't seem to know whether Reyes was male or female. Sir, ma'am. Through the kitchen." "The kitchen, of course," Reyes declared. "It's pretty much as I suspected." He beckoned to Gaggara. "Come on, we leave through the kitchen." Agnar pushed her chair back and stood up. "Well, good luck to both of you. I hope you find your sister. I had better be getting back before they miss me." "Come with us," Reyes suggested, pointing towards the kitchen door. "She's too old for you," Gaggara remarked with a grin. "She's beyond childbearing age." "Gaggara," Reyes commented harshly. "I'm inviting her along because she's a friend, not because I want her to bear my children. You are the only one I want for that task." "That's sweet," Gaggara commented, fluttering her eyelids. "I'd love to come along," Agnar replied. "But your girlfriend is right. I would only hold you back. I'm of no real value to you. Besides, I have a village now. They might not respect me as much as I like, but they need me, and they know it." Reyes cleared his throat and nodded, but he didn't like it. He would have felt more comfortable had Agnar agreed to come with him, but he understood her reasons for wanting to stay. He glanced quickly over at the innkeeper and smiled at the man. It was a smile that made the man shiver, although Reyes had intended no malice. He decided to try and put the man's mind at ease. He spoke in flourish so that the innkeeper could understand him. "Agnar, since you aren't coming with me, would you be willing to do me a favour?" "It depends on what that is," Agnar replied. "I'm not going to get into trouble with Tiffany for you. I'm not willing to do anything that will get me kicked out of my new family. I just want you to watch over the innkeeper and his family. He's had some bad experiences with our kind in the past, and—" "You're too soft-hearted," Agnar interrupted. "I have to agree there," Gaggara offered. "Fine," Reyes said. He felt he needed to put it another way, so he said, "I gave this man a silver coin last night. Next time I pass through this village, he owes me and Gaggara a meal and a room. I would appreciate it if he and his family were still alive, so we can collect." The innkeeper's eyes seemed to widen at the implication. His mouth dropped open slightly. Reyes knew what the man had to be thinking. Could a harpy really be trying to stand up for him and his family? "Well," Agnar offered, "I'll see what I can do, but my opinion doesn't carry a lot of weight with my sisters. I have very little power." "Just do what you can," Reyes asked of Agnar. Then he turned to the innkeeper and said simply, "Innkeeper," with a slight nod of his head by means of a thank you. "Harpy," the innkeeper replied uncertainly. He bowed just a little, his mouth still gaping. As Reyes and Gaggara ducked behind the bar on their way to the kitchen, he could hear the innkeeper addressing Agnar. "Can I get you anything to drink, ma'am?" "On the house, of course." And the reply from Agnar, "Thank you, but no. I really should get out front to try and distract my sisters long enough for those two to get away." The inn's kitchen was pretty much as Reyes had expected it would look. There were a large number of cupboards and shelving units, a wide array of cutlery and crockery, tankards, and even a few goblets. There was a large wooden butcher's block, and even a barrel filled with water. The innkeeper's wife was standing over by the butcher's block, a large wicked-looking cleaver in her hand, a headless chicken sitting on the block, awaiting its fate. Reyes inclined his head just slightly towards the innkeeper's wife by way of greeting as he walked past her. The innkeeper's wife brought the cleaver down hard and fast, striking the butcher's block clearly with the intent of disarming herself and making herself look as harmless as possible. Reyes was certain that she would have loved to have used that cleaver on either himself or Gaggara, so he kept a respectful distance. The innkeeper's wife also tried to keep her distance, even going so far as to lean away from the two harpies to give them as much room as she could. Soon, Reyes was at the door. He opened it just a little and peered out at the world beyond. He wanted to check to see what lay in wait for him before he and Gaggara risked venturing out there. The kitchen exit pointed out towards the north of the country. It faced towards the chicken houses. From here, it would be relatively easy to grab a chicken and bring it into the kitchen. The doomed fowl wouldn't have to be dragged through the barroom where it might shed feathers into a customer's ale or food, and no one even needed to see the bird before it was cooked. At the moment, the chickens weren't alone. One of Agnar's sisters was in the chicken run trying to catch one of the hens. Reyes watched the harpy for no more than a moment. He couldn't help thinking that, come nightfall, the innkeeper and his wife would be lucky if they had a single bird left alive. Fortunately, the harpy seemed so intent with her hunt that she didn't look up in time to see Reyes looking at her. Reyes pulled the door closed and stood there waiting. He put his ear to the wood of the door and listened for the telltale flapping of wings that he assumed would tell him that the coast was clear. As Reyes listened at the door, his attention was drawn to a conversation that was happening near the front of the building. "Hi, slave." It was a surly voice that had spoken, a woman's voice, and she had poured as much vitriol into the comment as she could manage. From the sound of it, the one who had spoken was sitting on the roof of the inn. Reyes then heard movement up there. Whoever had spoken was moving carefully across the roof, quite likely towards the one she had spoken to. Hello, Flegny," came the reply. The voice, distant and muffled. There was a touch of fear in her voice. It was Agnar's voice. Agnar must have left the barroom through the main doors, and she had caught the guard's attention. "Been busy enjoying a drink when there's work to be done," Flegny reprimanded. I was just checking on something," Agnar said defensively. "Sure you were," Flegny replied coldly. "If I had my way, we'd kill you now. We need to remove some of the chaff. But Tarifni says you're useful. Maybe she'll change her mind if you're never around when she wants you. Tarifni has been looking for you." "Did she say why?" Agnar asked meekly. "What am I?" Flegny asked angrily. "Do I look like some sort of messenger service to you? All I know is that Begrafin is dead." "Begrafin is dead?" Agnar repeated in a disbelieving tone. "That's what I said," Flegny replied sternly. "What are you, deaf as well as useless?" "Oh, how sad," Agnar said, almost singing the words. Clearly she hadn't got on with Begrafin either. She was torn to ribbons, her voice suddenly very low and harsh sounding. "Killed by the claws of a harpy. So you can guess who our main suspect is." "I have no idea," Agnar replied. But from her tone it was clear she knew exactly who was about to get the blame for this death. "You are," Flegny responded without nuance. "You never did get on well with Begrafin, did you? You'd love to see her dead, wouldn't you? Perhaps you should flee the village while you still can. It'll give our huntresses, you know, those of us who actually have some value, a little sport." "It couldn't have been me," Agnar replied defensively. There was definitely fear in her voice. I haven't even seen Begrafin this morning." "That's exactly what the killer would say," Flegny said. Then, with a measured amount of disapproval in her voice, she added, "Unfortunately, Tarifni seems to support your claim. She says that your movements are well known to her up until the body was found. Personally, I still think you did it, but the leader says you're in the clear. It's a shame. I was looking forward to hunting you down." "I'd better go and find Tarifni," Agnar commented. "See what she wants." "You do that," Flegny told her. "And if I find out that you did have anything to do with Begrafin's death, I shall take great pleasure in making you suffer." "Of that I'm sure," Agnar replied. Reyes sighed. It didn't sound to him as if Agnar really belonged as a member of this village. He glanced round at Gaggara appraisingly. He eyed the dart thrower Gaggara was holding. It was easy to piece things together. Begrafin must have caught Gaggara out in the open and attacked. Gaggara had obviously gotten the better of the now dead harpy. Reyes had been so busy listening to the conversation, he hadn't noticed when, or even if, the harpy had left the chicken run. He decided to risk pushing the door open slightly again in order to take a look. The harpy that had been raiding the chickens had gone. leaving a mass of feathers all over the place. Reyes opened the door just wide enough so that he could squeeze through the opening. Then he stood there, his back to the wall of the inn, looking at what he could see of the rest of the village. There were a number of harpies visible from where Reyes stood, and no doubt they would be able to see him if they should happen to glance his way. He began to feel very exposed and quite conspicuous. Gaggara joined him. She opened the door wide and stepped out as if she belonged there. Reyes couldn't help thinking that she had exactly the right idea. Reyes stepped away from the wall, trying to look as natural as possible, as if he had just been standing there while he was waiting for Gaggara to join him. Then he stepped alongside her and patted her gently on the arm. He wanted to take Gaggara's hand in his, show her a little affection, but he daren't do anything of the kind for fear that someone would notice and think it suspicious. Together, Reyes and Gaggara walked towards the road, the King's Eastern Highway. As soon as they had the opportunity, they ducked round the side of the inn, and now the building stood between them and the rest of the village, hopefully hiding them from any unwanted attention. Reyes breathed deeply and looked up and down the road. There were bound to be harpies watching for fleeing humans, though it seemed unlikely to Reyes that any human would try fleeing along the road. The nearby woods would offer many more opportunities for a fleeing human to hide than the open road would. Nevertheless, Reyes was certain that there'd be more than just Flegney keeping a lookout around here, and he had lost the window that Agnar had provided for him when she kept that harpy busy. Now what? Gaggara asked, keeping her voice very quiet. Uncertain that the way was truly clear, Reyes unfurled his wings and whispered, "Now we fly." "Now we fly," came a relatively loud echo. Reyes cursed himself. As quiet as he had tried to whisper, Flegney, at least he assumed it was she, had overheard him from somewhere on the roof of the inn. Her comment was followed by a brisk laugh and the flapping of wings. Flegney had been watching over the village rather than the road. Reyes could understand why. The village, with all its activity, would be a far more interesting prospect than an empty road. Flegney landed briefly at the very top of the inn, resting for less than a second on the roof's apex. Being a converted barn, its roof had steep sides. They were far too steep for a harpy to perch on, but at the point where the roof and the inn met the walls, there was a small ledge, an ideal spot for a harpy to rest her legs. "Did Tirithny give you permission to be here?" "Yes, she did," Reyes bluffed. "In fact, she asked us to scout the road up ahead. She wants us to find out how far it is to the next village," Gaggara offered. "Really?" Flegney commented doubtfully. "If you follow the road, the next village is called Sharbrook, and it's a city, not a village. Tirithny already knows this." Reyes commented. He was at a loss for what to say. "Gaggara came to the rescue. She wants us to check that there are no soldiers on their way from there." "Sounds to me like you're changing your story," Flegney commented. "Who are you two anyway? I pride myself on knowing most of the girls in my village, and yet I don't think I've seen either of you two before." "Flegney," Reyes said, feeling that by using the harpy's name it would show that they had met before. "How can you say that? Surely you remember us." "No," Flegney replied coldly. She pulled an arrow from her quiver and in slow, deliberate movements she knocked it to her bow. "I think we should go and talk to Tirithny. If she knows who you are, I'll accept that I made a mistake. At the moment, though, I'm on the lookout for any girl I don't recognise. I'm looking for the killer of a good friend of mine." "We don't have time for this," Gaggara voiced. Then she sprang into action. When she wanted to, Gaggara could move very quickly. She let her dart throw drop to the floor, and then she half jumped and half flew up the side of the inn and grabbed hold of Flegney by the ankles. Gaggara then planted her feet firmly against the side of the inn and used the extra leverage that afforded her to pull Flegney clean off her perch. Flegney, in an attempt to resist Gaggara's pull, fell back against the roof of the inn, her arms flailing to regain some sort of balance. Then, as Gaggara continued to pull, the bottom of one of Flegney's wings hit the ledge that she had been so recently perched upon. The wing began to bend back on itself at an angle that was most unnatural for it. Reyes was almost certain that he heard the bone snap. Flegney cried out in pain. Flegney and Gaggara fell in a heap. Flegney hit the ground hard on her back, but Gaggara, on the other hand, was able to control her fall and landed astride her prey. "We don't have long," Reyes said worriedly. "Someone must have heard that cry." Gaggara looked round at Reyes momentarily and then concentrated her attention on Flegney. "Idiot!" She grabbed one of Flegney's arrows. They were scattered all over the ground after the fall. "Did you really think we would just stand there and let you shoot us?" That wasn't how Reyes remembered it. Flegney had been trying to take the two of them prisoner. Not that such a fate would have been any better. "Tell me," Flegney said. There was no fear in her voice. She looked at Gaggara straight in the eyes. "Before you kill me, did you kill Begbafine?" Gaggara didn't reply. She reversed the arrow and brought it down hard and fast, aiming for her victim's heart. Flegney gave out another cry, and then was silent. "We'd better go," Reyes said. Gaggara climbed to her feet quickly, rubbing her hands together to try and clean some of the blood off of them. "I wonder if Begbafine was the other one I killed." "Probably," Reyes declared urgently. He felt they had spent enough time here already. Surely it wouldn't be long before someone came to find out what all the screaming had been about. "Come on, let's go." Without waiting to see if Gaggara was even listening, Reyes took to the air. He beat his wings as fast as he comfortably could and began to follow the King's Highway to the south. He also kept as low to the ground as he could, in the hope that his grey body would be hidden in part by the muddy brown dirt track that made up this part of the highway. Gaggara followed close behind him, and being a much more experienced flyer than he, she was soon flying alongside him and keeping pace with him fairly comfortably. It was less than a minute since he had taken to the air when he decided to risk a quick glance over his shoulder. At first, there didn't seem to be any pursuit. Then Reyes saw a couple of harpies checking over Flegney's dead body. One of them looked up and pointed in his and Gaggara's general direction. They had been seen.